Most of us are centered by the herd.
Mm.
But if you don't run with the herd, then you have to be centered inside of yourself.
Well, I guess we're starting right out the gate with the tough question. There are no easy softballs with you, huh? I feel like sometimes when we look at challenges, you want to call it the terrible thing instead of calling it the opportunity.
Pain always brings a gift.
Any of the things that separate us, I know that you can find something that can connect you to somebody else.
There's so much good, solid soul food in that statement.
You don't have to aspire to be back where you were. Perhaps you were more beautiful in your brokenness.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depends on what time zone you're in. I want to welcome you to the Jake's Divinity Masterclass that I have the privilege of conducting, premiering with these students who are bachelor, master's degrees, and doctoral programs, but then to be shared with the general populace. So if you are part of the general community, we invite you to eavesdrop on a very, very special opportunity that we have to introduce and present to you a very unique person. Before I present her to you, let me level set just a little bit. This woman has more credentials than I can hold in my head. I have to read them. There are so many. In fact, there were some I didn't even know that existed. She's in the Hall of Fame, inducted as a marketing executive. The Harvard Business School case study has written a very elaborate and illustrious review on her leading with authenticity. And when you meet her, you will see why they said that about her. Her brilliant career has spanned absolutely everywhere. This woman has been a force to be reckoned with. She has been the global CMO for Netflix, the CMO for Endeavor, the chief brand officer for Uber, the head of marketing for Apple Music and iTunes. She's been the head of music and entertainment for marketing at PepsiCo, and on and on and on. She's a dear, dear friend of mine. Would you please welcome Bozoma Saint John to come and talk to us today? Hello, Bozoma.
Hello, Bishop. Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. And I for one second, I was like, oh gosh, he's going to keep reading, huh? I mean,
Yeah, I wanted to look at the picture, you know.
thank you for that. Thank you very much.
It occurs to me as I look at your life and as I've gotten to know you, I describe you almost as a superhero who goes into these corporate situations that are sometimes on fire and are hard to be able to bring some equity, some balance, some peace, some tranquility into those regimes and change the culture and atmosphere. That's a lot to do. How do you do that?
Well, I guess we're starting right out the gate with the tough question. There are no easy softballs with you, huh?
Coming is coming.
I know, right? Okay, good. I find that now people do describe me as that. I've been called a crisis specialist, which I actually think is quite an interesting title because I see myself simply as a solution specialist. Someone who can see the forest from the trees, and then when I need to see the trees, I can see the trees. And figure out like, do we need to uproot this one and put it over there instead? I feel like sometimes when we look at challenges, you want to call it the terrible thing instead of calling it the opportunity. And so even though it may seem like I go into crisis and be able to calm, I just see myself going into situations and finding the solution. And in so doing, I want to be creative about it. I also find that because we are human and we want to go to comfort and we want to go to peace, often we only use the things that we're used to in order to solve maybe even new problems that we see. And so I'm always looking for like the creative way, the different way. And that can create some risk. So you have to have some vulnerability in order to say, hey, look, I know that everybody else has tried it this way and it's worked that way sometimes for some people, but we have to try go that way. And that has only come because also, to be very honest, and I'm sure we're going to get here at some point, it's not as if I go into places where I look like everybody else, and so I know also that I can't bring solutions that are like everybody else. I have to bring them from my own experiences, and I have to bring them from my understanding of the world. And I find that being a Black woman in these spaces, and with all the challenges that it comes with, has also been a blessing, because I am able to be comfortable even in very uncomfortable situations.
That is what I want to get to, and that might answer my next question, because I was going to ask you, it's very common now for us to talk about people having superpowers. What is your superpower? Would you say that is your superpower?
Yes, I think my superpower is being a Black woman. my, my superpower is exactly that. It's like, look, we are challenged every day with having to have grace when we don't want to.
Right.
Having to find ways to navigate a world that a lot of times is not welcoming of us and our ideas and our anger or our disappointment or our joy or our love. All of these emotions that can be really quite intimidating if you don't understand where we come from. And so I've simply had to figure out how to be in spaces like that when I know that people aren't used to me, and show up anyway, show up unafraid to some degree. And maybe unafraid isn't even the right word, because I certainly have fear a lot of times when I enter spaces like that. But I know that there's no other choice. I've never been anything else but this.
If you just joined us, we have the privilege of talking to Bozoma Saint John, who has mastered the art of being uncomfortable in the room and making herself comfortable and changing the cultures of organizations, and to the point that she's highly sought after. But the reason that she is here today in part is because she is an author of The Urgent Life. And if you haven't got a copy of it, you have to get it. Not only does it give you a deeper look into Bozoma and her way of thinking and her logic, but I think it's going to give you food for your soul and your life and give you the courage to walk into rooms. Bozoma, when I started looking over your book, one of the things that she talked about is from the earliest of your childhood, you had to start not as a Black woman, but as a Black girl, walking into rooms where you didn't know anybody. And your parents originally traveled quite a bit, I think, till you were around 12 years old. And you find yourself consistently going into rooms, having to make friends. And a lot of people listening at us right now who are in our doctoral program or in our master's program, or just somebody who's listening at large, finds it very difficult to find the courage. You talked about creativity, but the courage to walk into new rooms and still be your authentic self. How did that childhood shape the woman I see today?
Yeah. Well, I think, we all hate that dreaded recess time. When you were a kid, the bell rang and you're like, oh no, no, now I can't just sit in my seat. I have to go outside, or lunch bell where you don't know who to sit with and you don't know anybody. And I found that, and this, of course, in hindsight, I've been able to articulate it so much better than obviously when I was a kid. But I think the exercise of constantly trying to find the connector, between me and the strangers, sharpened something for me. It helped me to understand that we're not one-dimensional. There's not just one identity that you have, or there's not just one aspect of your personality that you have. So I think sometimes when we think about authenticity, we think, oh, it's only this one thing. This is the one thing that I have to show up with. And if I don't show up with that thing, then I'm a fake. That's not true. We have so many parts of our personalities. And so sometimes it's about leading with one thing versus the other thing. And that is also authentic. You're not lying to anybody. You're not pretending to be something you're not. But we all have so many different parts of us that could be connectors to somebody else's similarity. And so harnessing that and being able to polish it as a kid certainly helps me today. And it's helped me throughout my career because yes, I can walk into any room and I know I can connect with somebody. What it has shown me, and as you said, my parents moved around a lot when I was a kid. And so I was frequently in and out of not just different classrooms, but different cultures and different languages. And I know for sure that it doesn't matter if somebody doesn't speak your language or doesn't look like you or doesn't have the same religion you do or doesn't have like any of the things that separate us. I know that you can find something that can connect you to somebody else. And that's really the key to communication. And is the key to how then you create the bonds that allow you to be vulnerable and allow you to be authentic.
That is counterintuitive to the way that a lot of religious people think, because they think that their strength is in isolating from people who are different from them. And they think that, what is so-and-so doing with so-and-so? And they must be a Christian now, or they wouldn't be talking to the bishop. I get that a lot. Why is the bishop talking to so-and-so? That doesn't make sense. Those connecting points are very important in building your ability to change the world. You can't change the world if you stay in your room.
Yeah.
You have to come out of your room sooner or later and embrace people and find connective tissue for skin graft. And you can't influence people that you don't talk to.
Ooh, yeah, exactly.
When I think about you, I think about influence. A lot of people don't know, but the Congressional Black Caucus going to Ghana and meeting with the former president and all of that, you were a lot of the choreographer that helped to put all of that together. That's a lot of influence internationally. And you're flying back and forth. In fact, when you spoke for our staff meeting, you had just landed from Ghana, which I don't know how you do that. And I would have been asleep in the middle of the session. But you look fresh as a daisy and talk cleaner as a whistle. And yet you are used to moving internationally. This cosmopolitan experience that you described, though it happened in America, is it in some way rooted to the fact that you are Ghanaian, raised in America? Did that require that you have a certain sensitivity to diversity?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I really love the fact that you talk about influence, because I think oftentimes we think you have to have a certain title, or be equal to somebody in standing in order to, or in fact, maybe be higher than them in order to have influence on people. But that's actually the wrong way to look at it. We all have influence from where we sit, right? And you don't have to be the highest person in the room to influence the group of people. And that is what I also learned about, the different cultures around the world, and certainly about being sometimes a foreigner in every place that I'm in, right? Because my family moved here when I was young enough for me to acclimate to the culture of America, drop my accent so that I sound American. And so when I go to Ghana, people ask me, oh, where are you from? And then when I'm in America, people will hear my name and say, oh, where are you from?
Right.
And so I'm always a foreigner wherever I am. And the idea of influence is that I have to, this goes back to what we're just talking about authenticity. It's like, well, what do I bring? What do I have to offer that can be helpful to the room? And so I think of influence as just like, how can I be helpful? How can I serve this group of people that now I am seeing? And that is how I show up. And that is how then I influence, because I'm simply serving. So if I have marketing know-how and I understand how to attract people to an idea or a brand or a country, that is how I'm going to serve that administration or the country in bringing those people. And it happens in business too. So when I'm in a room, and it doesn't matter, along my career, it hasn't mattered what my title has been. It's like when I was at PepsiCo and I was a junior executive, wasn't the one making the decisions just yet. What I brought to the table was my understanding and my knowledge of pop culture. And therefore, it was like, oh, I was serving my colleagues and my bosses and everyone around with that knowledge. And then I became influential. Because then it was like every time somebody wanted to know, oh, what's happening in the music space or what's happening in sports, somebody should go and ask Boz.
I am stuck. There's so many powerful things that you just said that I want to go back and pick at all of them. I'm stuck at the fact that you said you're a foreigner no matter what room you walk into. And as such, being an immigrant walking into new situations always, I would assume that you have to have a very strong center of self. Because most of us are centered by the herd. But if you don't run with the herd, then you have to be centered inside of yourself. When you talk about this book, and you've got to get this book, The Urgent Life, you've got to get your hands on it, because it is full of nuggets, just like this conversation is, that will help you to lead better, to think better, and to serve better, to love better, to live vivaciously and bodaciously and courageously. And that's not easy to do in times like these. When you look at that center, that centers you. You told me a story when I was over your house. I don't know if you want to tell it today, but you told me a story about being a little girl going over all the other little girls' house, and they were having pizza and coming home and telling your mother, they're coming over our house, Mom, and we've got to have pizza. And to that, she said,
well, when they come to our house, they will eat the food we eat. And she made them pepper soup, which for anyone who has not had pepper soup, you don't know that will set your whole soul on fire. Okay, not just your tongue, and your eyeballs will start to sweat also. And these poor little white children in Colorado Springs, Colorado, where we were living, would be all red-cheeked and snotty-nosed and everything. And she was like, look, they're going to eat our food when they come to our house. And they will hear our language when they come to our house. And that part is what has centered me also, knowing that regardless of where I am, people have to be used to me.
Right.
They correct themselves because my presence is in the room, not because I am trying to assimilate into theirs. And that was a valuable lesson that for sure, it's like, even if I am a foreigner in a room, I expect that the room centers also to me.
There's so much good, solid soul food in that statement that comes from your mother, who I had the privilege of meeting. And by the way, she's a great cook, and give her my love. Yes. I come to Boz's house for dinner, and Boz has her mother preparing meal for all of these prestigious women. I mean, everybody you could think of is at her house. You come to my house, you're going to get JoJo and Kubo and Nene. You go to Boz's house, you're going to get presidents and heads of states and senators and actors and all of that kind of stuff. And Boz is just floating all over the room, a beautiful, beautiful home that is ornate and lovely and with class and dignity, and serving Ghanaian food.
That's right.
To all of these people, and they loved it. There were clean plates everywhere.
Right, that's correct. But that's just it, right? I mean, it could have been a choice to have it, catered with something that would be more middle of the road. That maybe this very diverse crowd dinner table would all maybe be okay with. Maybe a little chicken dish that didn't have any flavor to it or something, just to help manage the palates. But that lesson I learned at 12 is still with me here in my late 40s, that the room centers to our culture and our being when you're in our space. And for sure, like I said, it is what has helped. And I'm glad your plate was clean also, Bishop.
Oh, yeah.
I think we try to send you home with some food, too.
Yeah, but, I've been to Ghana many times, and so I eat fufu and jollof.
Yes.
And the whole thing, and the pepper soup. I can go to the oxtail. Yeah, I can hang. This is international fat I got here.
That's hysterical.
But you have done some amazing things against the adversity of some pretty tough times, and quite shockingly in your book, The Urgent Life, you talk very openly about pain and struggles and perseverance and overcoming those sorts of things with candor, with sensitivity. Life for you has not been a crystal stairs.
Mm.
In spite of all the Hall of Fame and all the awards and all the trophies and all of that, you've had trophies and trials, but you've had trials that were blistering. You talk about losing your husband, going through dark days, watching him fade away. The reason I want you to talk to us about that, because not all of us have lost our spouse, but all of us have lost something. We've lost jobs, we've lost houses, we've lost loved ones, we've lost strength, we've lost courage, we've lost time, and all of those things bring a certain kind of grief. How did you handle those dark moments in your life?
Well, I also love the fact that you referenced one of my favorite poems in that line, life ain't been no crystal stair. Because when you're standing at the top of the building or the mountain or in the corner office, I think there's an assumption that it's been a crystal stair. You must have skated up there with ease. And in my book, I wanted to be clear that, yes, we all have lost something or someone, or we've suffered some trauma that has felt like it was going to fail you, as if you would never recover, as if like you could never take another step forward. And I have suffered those too. And yet and still, I am still here. Now, I will never be the person I was before that happened. And I'm not even looking for normalcy that way. I remember at the start of the pandemic, people kept saying, I'm waiting for things to go back to normal before I do X, Y, and Z thing. I mean, it's part of the reason why I wrote the book about urgency, not just about speed, but about intention, that you're looking for the reason why you're doing the thing, and making sure that you're doing the thing that is right for you in spite of everything. And so in the process of losing my husband, and for those who have had to be the caregiver, while a loved one suffered, we know that oftentimes we're focused so much on the person who is suffering that the caregiver gets lost somewhere along the way. And when people leave from the funeral, the phone stops ringing, they stop bringing the casseroles over, you're left by yourself.
Absolutely.
To figure out what happens next. And sometimes it can be so dark that you can't really find your way out of it. And so for me, it's been a journey of really understanding, maybe even back to the lessons we were just talking about how to center, and how to be sufficient so that your, what you need isn't somewhere out in the world, with somebody else, someplace else. And it's a reason why my faith plays into it. It's a reason why my own self need of joy and happiness and choosing that, like letting it be a choice, has been the healing process.
Yes.
That it's not necessarily because I'm waiting for something to get back to normal, or that I'm waiting for somebody else to bring me some solace. But how have I been able to find it in a way that's going to be sustainable, regardless of what comes? Regardless of what comes.
That's a powerful thing, and it really hits me right in the throat, because I was raised by a dying father. And my father died, got sick when I was 10 and died when I was 16. And you live life differently when you're raised by somebody who's dying. It changes your perspective, and it changes the pace of your speed. So I did not think it was strange when you wrote the urgency, because I think that dying teaches you to appreciate living
Yes.
in such an impactful way that people who have not been around the dying don't understand why you live with such vivacious gusto, because you know not to take your next breath for granted. And am I on the right track with
Oh,
what?
absolutely. Absolutely. It was so interesting. I was having this conversation with a friend a few years ago before I decided to write the book. And she said, but why would you want to write about so much trauma? Why would you want to write about death? Nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody's gonna buy that book. You just all sad and terrible and crying. And I thought, gosh, well, but who said that it was sad and terrible? That perhaps it's actually motivating and inspiring. And that's the way that I view the experiences that I've had. Of course, there are many times when grief knocks me out of nowhere, and you just all of a sudden you were doing something and then boom, here it comes. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but the thought of what am I going to do with this life right now?
Yes.
Is motivating. And you are absolutely right. When you have been in the process of either watching someone die or having someone's life snatched out of just thin air, just out of the blue.
Yes.
Or you have lost a job that was your entire identity, or any other thing that has happened to you which just threw you off course. You realize that you don't have time to waste. That it should feel motivating. And so I don't find it morbid at all to have these conversations or to feel like, oh gosh, here she go again, talking about it. No, I find it motivating. I'm like, look, my husband died 4 days before his 44th birthday. And up until I turned 44, I was out here just like, okay, got to get in this thing, got to get the next thing, make sure this happens, make sure that happens. I was not going to waste any time. And so if there was a situation that I was unhappy with, I was out of there. That it motivated me to move. And then after I turned 44, I was like, oh, okay, yeah. I'm still on this pace because the Lord knows how much more time I have. And I don't want to take any of it for granted.
Right.
There's actually, Bishop, the epitaph in my book at the beginning is from a wonderful author I love, Diane Ackerman. And I'm going to paraphrase what she said, but she said essentially that, you never want to get to the end of your life and have just lived the length of it. You want to live the width of it as well. And it struck such a chord with me because sometimes we think of time only in the number of years.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I want to get to 90. I want to get to 120. I want to get to whatever number that is. Right. But I wonder about the width of the life. How are your days spent? What do your years look like? Are they bursting with experiences and joy and love and all of the things? Like, let's just make sure that our days are wide also. And that's why I'm motivated, even in the space or in the light of death.
So many things I want to ask you. As I understand it, you were about to walk away from the relationship when he got sick. And he asked you to stay. And one of the things I love about you talking about that is that life is complicated. It's complicated. It's not like the stories we were taught when we were young and the bedtime stories. There's all of these complicated issues, and you're about to walk away, and he gets cancer and asks you to stay, and you did it. And stayed till he died and mourned after he left this world. It made me want to ask you this question. What is love to you?
Oof, what is love? What is love? Oof. Yeah, you're going to make me cry.
Well, the thing is, we live in a world of people who are so self-centered. If I'm not happy, I'm out. If this doesn't go the way I want, I'm out. You made a U-turn and stayed with somebody you know was sick and you knew might die.
Mm. Yeah.
And it made me know that you're not just charismatic and vivacious, you have to be a very deep well. And I don't think the world today knows what love is.
Mm. Mm.
What is love to both?
Yes. What is love? Well, I did think that love was the thing you read on Valentine's Day cards. I thought love was, the vows that you say at the altar and forget them the next day. I thought it was for the show,
Right.
supposed to take the photos and be sentimental about it. But love is so much more complicated, as you said. Love means making the decision sometimes for your well-being, but based on somebody else's well-being. Because I don't believe that love is just about the sacrifice of giving yourself over, so that somebody else can be happy or somebody else can be joyful. Bishop, you asked, or you said, he asked me to stay, and I did. And I did so not just for him. I did it for myself also. I loved him and loved myself and loved our marriage and loved our child. And I wanted to be sure that the ways that I would be able to survive after he passed was because I had given every bit of that love to him. And that in the decision to stay, I knew also that I would be able to say the things that I needed to say, that we would be able to forgive each other for the things that we had done to hurt each other, and that it was a gift. It was a gift. God had given us a chance to reconcile when we were very close to the brink of divorce over things that perhaps, yes, of course, can destroy marriages. It's like, look, we know marriage is not easy. That's for sure.
No. It's funny because you use the word gift, and I was getting ready to say pain always brings a gift. If you can get past the sensation of the pain itself, it always brings a gift. Sometimes it's wisdom, sometimes it's perspective, sometimes it's opportunity, sometimes it's self-reflection, sometimes it's like bringing seasoning to food. The meat would be the meat without the seasoning, but the seasoning changes the whole experience of the meat itself. What were the gifts that came out of your tragedies?
Well, gosh, what were the gifts? I talk about this pretty candidly in my book as well, that in my marriage, Peter and I had a daughter before Lael, who is now 13 and a half. But we had a daughter who did not survive birth. I developed preeclampsia very early in my pregnancy, or earlier than I guess would be normal, at about 6.5 months pregnant, and had to go into labor at 7 months, and she didn't survive. And in her death, I really was reborn as a mother. Actually, it was my first pregnancy. I wasn't sure what to expect. If I can be totally candid, I was on a trajectory in my career, and I was afraid that becoming a mother would stop me, would slow my ambition. And so I was scared, and I wasn't sure if I even wanted to be a mother, to be honest with you. But when I got pregnant, I was like, okay, well, here we go. I guess this is what I'm going to do. And, in the process of becoming ill and then having to go through labor and then losing my child, the gift in it was that I knew for sure I wanted to be a mom. I knew for sure that if God were to give me another shot at it, that I would do everything in my power to be the best mother that I could, regardless of what came. And it was tested again. When it was like, okay, well, now you're going to be a single mom. So here you go. And even in that, the gift of even being a single mother now. And Peter died when Lael was 4, and I remember laying in the bed next to her. It was a few weeks after he had passed away, and she had climbed into my bed, and I was sitting there panicked, overwhelmed. Not sure all I could think of were the years ahead that I would have to raise this person by myself, and I was terrified and thought, like, how am I going to do it? And the gift in that moment was that I realized that I didn't want to just be the person who was driving all the time and making all of the decisions and trying to figure out what is next and figure her out and have all the right answers. I needed her help in that. And it has been the biggest gift of our relationship in that I am still ambitious, as you know from my resume.
Right.
I still want to achieve, but we have been able to form communication, which allows me the space to do what I need to do for my career and also satisfy her needs. So I'll give you an example. For instance, we have a system that I look at her schedule, she looks at mine, because 13-year-olds these days have schedules. I don't know this. Okay? Very serious schedules.
Yeah.
And we can communicate and say, okay, look, this is very important to me, Mom. I need you to be here for this particular thing. And I'll say, oh, man, I was supposed to be at this thing over here. Do you think we can rearrange? My point is that even in the pain of losing my first child and knowing that I want to be committed as a mother, and then being thrown the curveball of not just being a mom, but then being a single mom, the gifts in that were that I am so much more committed to my child and her well-being. And I'm also conscious of understanding how to incorporate her so that I am present for her, even in light of my ambition, even in light of wanting to run around the world and solve global issues and corporate issues and still be fabulous. That we have that connection. And that has been the biggest gift. I'm so grateful for it, for the lesson that brought us here.
When I look at my children, they're the strangest compilation of my wife and I. Sometimes it's my forehead and it's her nose. Sometimes they don't look like me, but I see my mannerisms. Sometimes they look like me, but they have her temperament. When you look at Lael, do you ever see Peter?
Oh, gosh, all the time. All the time. I think it might be even more acute because he's not here. I recognize things. And it's amazing that, like you were saying, mannerisms or things that couldn't be learned because she doesn't know him now, that she does, that I recognize immediately. So it's not just the things that look like him, like she has his eyes, and she knows that. She's seen pictures of him. She knows she has his eyes. But there are certain behaviors that she has that I'm like, oh, girl, that's not your dad,
Right.
And what I find to be a blessing even in that is that I have never shied away from talking about him actively, that I keep him very much alive in our home, because it was actually one of the things that I learned along in the process. A good friend of mine who is a psychologist said that, I shouldn't hide from my child in terms of like my grief or my memories or any of the things, like she should come along. And that was a gift to me. I didn't even know you should do that, because all you want to do as a parent is protect them, right? From sorrow, from anything that's going to hurt. But it has also been so great because then I'm able to say when, she does something or laughs a particular way or, she makes a comment or her sense of humor is very much like his. And for me to say, girl, that's just like your dad, and she finds it to be a blessing too, because she gets to know the things about him that she wouldn't know otherwise.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. She gets to know him through your eyes, and those eyes have to be loving eyes. If those eyes are not loving eyes, then if they were angry eyes, she would dislike that part of him in her.
Yes.
So her healing is predicated on your perspective. And a lot of mothers don't realize that the demonization of the father flows down to the child because the father is in the child too. You can't separate the part you want from the part that you don't want. I'm not going to take advantage of your time. In case you just joined us or you just happen to be listening right in, I am talking to Bozoma Saint John, which is one of the great privileges of a life. And she is full of vigor and authentic ideologies and vigor and fight and drive and passion and love. And she's written a book. If you think the conversation is captivating, wait till you get the book. The title itself, The Urgent Life, says to you and explains itself in the conversation that we're having right now. We have talked about love. We have talked about loss. We have not talked about survival. And you mentioned faith. How can we marry those two things? How does faith, your faith, affect your survival? And how much of that is God and how much of that is you, and how do you cohabitate together?
Oof. You have some heavy questions, Bishop. Ooh,
I want to be that different.
I have my water to help me along.
Yeah, I get it.
No, it's a complicated question because, and perhaps you can even probably speak to this, I'm sure, which is that my relationship with God has evolved so much over time, over my lifetime, over experiences, and for a moment there, I was really angry at God. Disappointed, maybe is a better word. Disappointed. I remember at one point during my husband's illness, it was, getting towards the end, and a friend had suggested that we have a conference call, like a prayer meeting over conference call, so that, different people from around the country and friends who lived abroad could join in. And I thought it was so brilliant because I was like, ooh, I've been praying and, unceasingly, and I'm tired. I want somebody else to join up in here in these prayers.
Right.
Had the conference call, and during the meeting, I remember thinking very vividly. I was just like, Lord, look, you're not going to listen to my prayer. Maybe you listen to all these other people's prayer who were asking for his healing. And Bishop, I really thought that was going to happen. I really did. With every fiber, I knew that his healing was coming. I knew it. Mm-hmm. And so when he died, I was so angry. And I thought, but he has been a faithful person. In fact, the scripture, on a bench that we have in Central Park and on his tombstone talks about the faithful servant.
Wow.
He was faithful. And I was like, I'm faithful. I don't understand how we could suffer this. Why you wouldn't give us healing? Why would you not answer just this one prayer? And in that disappointment and anger, I found that my relationship evolved because I realized that sometimes you can love somebody and not like them so much.
That's right.
And I was like, Lord, I love you, but I don't like you very much right now.
Right.
And I had to also realize that, yes, of course, I won't know the answers to everything. And I won't always understand the reasons why certain things happen. Even when we pray for the opposite to happen. And I had to form a different relationship with God. I had to become more trusting.
Yeah.
I had to become less self-involved. Wow. Less arrogant, even.
Wow.
Because I thought, well, but I am this and I am that, and I have prayed. Yeah. And you still didn't do what I asked you to do.
Right.
Like, I'm over here demanding.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so my relationship changed because I began to see myself differently. And that is where some of what we've been talking about around vulnerability, laying down the sword, and saying, okay, okay, I'm going to go this way. And it's so interesting because what happened to me in that time and what actually has been an accelerator in my life. And, when people ask me questions about my career and how did you jump here and jump here and jump here, I often talk about faith. Because I say, look, I don't know the journey. I don't know it. I can write down a plan. I can have goals and all of that. But what I am really doing is listening to what is happening in here. God often speaks to me through my intuition, through my instinct. And so in that trauma, my relationship with God changed. And I realized that I needed to become more humble in the presence of God and understand that I can demand and ask for the thing that I want. And sometimes that's not what I need to get.
Right.
So I became more instinctual because I started to trust the voice that's in here, And sometimes I feel like, I have to also be careful when I'm thinking, okay, this is your ego speaking and not God. That's not your instinct. That's not your gut. That's not the vibes.
That is your ego talking to you.
Right.
And so listening to that and being more aware has certainly been a catalyst for me in many, many ways and has helped me tremendously because now I'm not worried about the outside opinions or even my own opinion, to be honest with you. I could really like a thing and then be like, oh, okay, say it. See, now I have to go. See, because I heard it. I heard the voice. Now I got to go. I got to go do something else. And it has not been wrong. It's not been wrong. Even when I thought it was going to be a bad thing, even when something felt like a failure or felt like, ooh, my prayer wasn't answered, it has turned out to be an even bigger lesson in my life, which has helped me and shaped me.
I often wonder what prayers about time sound like to a God from eternity.
Oof.
It reminds me of a story I heard about a hawk and a weasel. And the hawk was clutching on to the weasel and he kept flying higher and higher and the weasel was digging into the flesh of the hawk. And the problem was the weasel was killing the hawk because the hawk would not let the weasel go.
Oof.
And sometimes we hold on to things because they're all we know. And we become angry with God because we don't think that there's anything else. But if we believe that there is more on that side than this side, then his no is often our blessing. But it only comes when you begin to understand that what we're holding on to, this thing called time, isn't all that precious compared to eternity.
Oof.
And in my own mind, I kind of wrestle with that understanding of I am temporal and he is eternal, and I'm holding on to it because it's all that I know, but I'm holding on to something that's cutting at me all the while I'm holding on to it. And the reason I sing I surrender is to just let go and to trust that my times are in his hands.
Yes.
You've said so many amazing things today. You have exemplified not only in your career, but in your living, your loving, your openness to love again. You talk about in the book.
Yes.
She's single, y'all. That's not only surviving, but thriving spirit. What do you hope when people get to the last page of this book? What do you hope is left written in their hearts that they got from the pages you wrote?
You actually just said the word. I want them to hope. I want them to have hope. Because you can read my story and wonder, like, how is she even able to smile? How is she able to step a foot further? How is she not cowering in fear about what's going to happen next? And I want people to be hopeful about life for themselves, that regardless of what has happened to you, it is possible to thrive even in your brokenness. In my acknowledgments in the book, I talk about a Japanese art form called kintsugi, which I really have found quite fascinating, and I wish every culture had it. And essentially, the art form is that when pottery breaks, or like a plate breaks, it is put back together with precious metal. Sometimes it's gold or silver to make a new plate. So it is not the same as what it has been, but it is still beautiful. And so my desire for this book, and for people who engage with it and think about their own lives with urgency, is that things can happen to you that are going to break you, but that you don't have to aspire to be back where you were. Perhaps you are more beautiful in your brokenness. Perhaps you are better off in your brokenness. And so if you can appreciate the life that you have now, even with everything that has happened, that you are a better person for it, then perhaps your life really can be full of love, and you can survive and thrive outside of everything that has happened.
Thank you for bringing your life and laying it on the altar before the public. That is not easy to do. Thank you for your perseverance when you weren't getting awards or trophies or being acknowledged as CMOs and CBOs and all the other alphabets. Thank you for the alone times and the dark times and the dismal times, and leaving footprints for us to follow that lead us out of darkness into light. It's been a real joy, not a responsibility, to talk to you today. And I want to give a shameless plug. She's gonna be at Good Soul at our International Leadership Summit. I snatched her. And the reason I think that's important is because entrepreneurs often go up and down, good times and bad times. And one of the mistakes they often make is give up too soon. And I think that kind of tenacity for marriage, for ministers, for leaders, for entrepreneurs, is just because you hit a bad patch doesn't mean that the journey is over. I thank you because every crack in your life is shining like pure gold. And we see it, and we love you, and we appreciate you. To my class, to Jake's Divinity School, to all of you that are listening in, whether you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you are lucky enough to experience this treasure that God has taken in his hand and made it again another vessel, as seemeth good to the potter to make it. It has become more exquisite in its end than it is in its beginning. And I'll bet you as she goes on, she'll continue to shine brighter and brighter to a perfect day. Bozoma Saint John, the class all by herself.